This toy train is being controlled by thought alone. Simply by thinking about it, my female volunteer is able to make it start or stop, speed up or slow down. When she loses her mental focus for a moment, the train stops abruptly. Then, as she regains it, moves on again. So, how is she able to do this? Well, I've attached my volunteer to this small device. It's called an electroencephalogram. This is a 2-channel electroencephalogram. The machine reads electrical signals being generated by her brain, and I'll discuss what these are in my next video. And it's these signals which are able to control the train without her having to touch a dial, a speed dial, or click a switch. She doesn't touch the train at all. Her brain is doing all the work. Now, as I say, in my next video, I'll be telling you exactly how this works, what brain signals are actually being monitored, and why understanding how to exert a particular type of brainwave can be extremely beneficial to your health and well-being. It can help you relax, it can help you to meditate, it can help you temporarily to lose yourself in what we call an altered state of consciousness. This phrase is usually abbreviated to an ASC, and this is the term I should be using in this video. So they occur when you're daydreaming, they occur obviously when you're sleeping and dreaming, and they also occur in a state of being half asleep and half awake. This occurs when we are drifting in and out of sleep. You may have noticed it. These states of drifting in and out of sleep are known technically as hypnagogic and hypnopompic sleep. So this can happen. You can take in things which are going on around you in these two hypnagogic, hypnopompic states and kind of amalgamate it into a kind of strange dream. You can also enter an altered state of consciousness in some types of mental and physical illness. This is, for example, quite common when people are in a fever or recovering from anesthesia after an operation. Now, we can produce ASCs voluntarily and often deleteriously as well. For example, by drinking alcohol or taking a psychoactive drug. And I'm not suggesting you do this for a moment. I think it's a very foolish thing to do. But you could do it, for example, by taking heroin or LSD or cocaine. You could also be put into an altered state of consciousness by hypnosis, whether self-hypnosis, as Dan has taught in some of his earlier videos, or by going to a hypnotherapist like Dan. You could be transformed into another world by watching an engrossing film, listening to an inspiring piece of music, or reading a very absorbing novel, so you're actually lost in the story. Altered states are also triggered by prolonged periods of sensory deprivation, and these can be voluntary sensory deprivation or through compulsion. For example, a monk or a nun may go into an altered state of consciousness after a period of solitary confinement, which he doesn't talk or interact with anybody else. You can also do it voluntarily in a health clinic by going into a flotation chamber. Maybe some of you have experienced this. In such chambers, and here's a photograph of one, the person floats on a very rich bath of warmed water. It's very thick in salt, so you float very easily. You're in total darkness and absolute silence. Experiences like this can very rapidly change the way both your body and your brain are functioning, and you find yourself going deeper and deeper into a world created entirely by your imagination. Now, similar states of deprivation, of course, also occur under far less agreeable, painful situations. For instance, among prisoners who've been placed in long periods of solitary confinement in isolation. They are also reported by explorers or sailors, people who spend weeks or months all alone in the Arctic or the desert or the jungle, or when at sea, as on a solitary yacht race, as shown in this picture. This was actually photographed by a man called Alex Rose when he was making a solo round the world yacht race. Now, you may have encountered them yourself in a much less punishing circumstances, when, for example, you're driving alone after mile on a very long straight highway, particularly after darkness has fallen, and all you have is a long straight road with nothing to interrupt your senses. This has been called highway hypnosis, and it can, and so sadly sometimes does, lead to a single vehicle accident. This is especially likely to occur in the early hours of the morning or late at night when people are already feeling drowsy. Another experience of ASCs is regularly experienced by commuters who day after day, week after week, month after month, take exactly the same route to work, whether by car or train or bus. As they are travelling on this route, their mind is pretty much a blank, and when they get home or get to the office or their place of work, they're actually incapable of remembering any part of the journey, unless of course something very unusual has happened to them, such as seeing a collision or something like that, which makes the journey stand out. But normally we lose that. This is a very common occurrence. Maybe it's happened to you, and the psychologists have given it the name commuter amnesia, which means we blank out, we go into an altered state of consciousness when we're making such a routine commute. Military pilots I have worked with also experience when flying all by themselves at high speed and great altitude, and they have sometimes reported hallucinations, and these are due to altered states of consciousness. Now, the deliberate production of ASCs has throughout history involved psychedelic drugs, prolonged chanting or singing or dancing or drumming. All these situations have long played a major role in various forms of religious ceremony and spiritual healing. Interestingly, in my research into churches like you find in a country village, or very grand churches such as you find in a cathedral city, I found that the actual physical structure of the church, the actual way it's constructed, enhanced the production of a type of ASC which is associated with a deeply relaxed and very meditative state. So the building itself is a kind of a generator of these ASCs, and I say I'm going to discuss all this in greater detail in my next video. Now, the type of ASC you experience under these conditions in a church or when you're meditating or relaxing is typically associated with what are called alpha waves in the brain. Alpha waves. These are waves with a particular frequency, which I'll discuss in my next video. And for decades, the study and use of ASCs has been largely confined to Eastern practices rather than Western therapeutic practice. We haven't in the West simply been very interested in these states. Now, going back to the 19th and the very early 20th century, there was some interest in ASCs. Both British and American psychologists were intrigued by them and tried to explore more. And of course, Freud talked a great deal about the ASC of our unconscious mind. He thought that was very important, and he was right, of course, that it can be very important in determining our behaviour. But all this interest vanished during the 50s and the 60s when behavioural psychology came to dominate the scene, both in therapy and in research. Today, I'm glad to say, the past decade or so, and I've been working on this for about 30 years, there is much more scientific interest in ASCs. Meditation, for example, has been rediscovered by modern psychology because of its ability to help people stabilize their minds and allow the mind to settle down. Similarly, hypnotism, once I'm sad to say dismissed as no more than a kind of musical trick, is today widely used by clinicians, highly reputable clinicians like my colleague Dan Jones. And we know from practical experience, having worked with hundreds of people over the years, that it can produce a very powerful altered states of consciousness which can be very beneficial to the person involved. Until then, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please write to Dan or myself via this YouTube channel. And remember that by subscribing, you will be sure never to miss another episode.